She walked into the lawyer's office quietly, her footsteps careful, controlled, almost rehearsed. It had been over a year since he last saw her, since the arguments, the accusations, the cold silences that eventually led to divorce papers. In his mind, she was still the woman who walked out with nothing but a suitcase and a broken look in her eyes. But today, something was different. Her face looked fuller, paler, and there was a strange heaviness in the way she moved. He barely noticed it at first, his anger drowned out everything else. As she sat across from him, avoiding eye contact, he felt the familiar irritation rise. This meeting was supposed to be simple: sign the final papers, end it once and for all, and walk away. No emotions. No drama. That's what he had told himself. But as she adjusted her coat, his eyes drifted down, and his breath caught in his throat. Her hands instinctively rested on her stomach, not flat, not slim, but unmistakably round. Time seemed to freeze. The lawyer kept speaking, but the words became noise. His heart pounded as realization hit him like a blow to the chest. She wasn't just pregnant, she was far along. 7 months, maybe more. His mind raced with questions, confusion, and disbelief. How could this be? Why hadn't she told him? And then came the most painful thought of all: is the child mine? She noticed his stare and slowly looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of fear, strength, and exhaustion. In that moment, he understood that this meeting wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about a truth that could change everything. The room fell into an awkward silence. The lawyer stopped mid-sentence, sensing something was wrong. He couldn't look away from her stomach, and she couldn't bring herself to speak. The air between them was heavy, filled with things unsaid. Finally, the lawyer excused himself, giving them privacy. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low and trembling, not with anger, but shock. She swallowed hard. "I didn't plan to tell you today," she said softly. "But I knew you'd see." Memories flooded his mind, their last months together, the distance between them, the nights he came home late, emotionally unavailable. He had accused her of being secretive, of pulling away. He never once considered that she was carrying something far bigger than their arguments. She explained that she found out she was pregnant shortly after she left. At first, she tried to reach him, but every call turned into an argument, every message unanswered. Eventually, she stopped trying. "I didn't want to raise a child in chaos," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And I didn't want a father who didn't want us." Her words pierced him. He remembered the harsh things he said, the doors he slammed, the divorce he demanded. Now, guilt crept in, slow and painful. He wanted to ask if the baby was his, but the fear of the answer stopped him. She looked him straight in the eyes and said quietly, "You never asked me why I left." And in that moment, he realized the silence he once ignored had been screaming all along. He finally asked the question that had been burning in his chest. "Is the baby mine?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded medical report. Her hands shook as she placed it on the table between them. "There was never anyone else," she said firmly. "You were always the only one." He stared at the paper, his vision blurring. A mix of relief and crushing guilt washed over him. This was his child, his flesh and blood, growing without him, protected by a woman he had pushed away. He wanted to say something meaningful, something apologetic, but no words came out right. She told him about the pregnancy, the sickness, the sleepless nights, the doctor visits she attended alone. She described the moment she first heard the heartbeat and cried in the parking lot because she wished he was there. She spoke calmly, but every sentence carried pain. "I didn't come here to get back together," she said. "I came to finalize the divorce and to make things clear, for the baby." She wasn't asking for money or sympathy. She just wanted peace and honesty. That hurt him more than anger ever could. She wasn't begging. She wasn't blaming. She had grown stronger in his absence, and that realization shattered him. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as his wife, not as his enemy, but as a mother. And he saw himself clearly too, a man who had mistaken pride for strength and distance for control. The divorce papers lay untouched on the table, but everything had already changed. When she stood up to leave, he panicked. The thought of her walking away again, this time with his unborn child, terrified him. "Wait," he said quickly. "Please." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I know I don't deserve it," he continued, his voice cracking, "but I want to be there. I should have been there from the start." She finally faced him, her expression guarded. "Wanting and being ready are not the same," she replied. She reminded him of the nights she cried alone, the messages she deleted, the strength she had to build when he chose absence. He apologized, not defensively, not with excuses, but genuinely. He admitted his failures, his fears, and his mistakes. He told her he was scared of responsibility, scared of becoming his father, scared of not being enough, and so he ran. Tears streamed down his face, surprising even himself. Regret weighed heavily on him, not just for losing his marriage, but for almost losing the chance to be a father. She listened quietly. She didn't interrupt or comfort him. When he finished, she said, "This isn't about us anymore. It's about the child." That sentence grounded him. For the first time, he understood that love wasn't about possession, it was about presence. And presence required effort, consistency, and humility. She didn't promise forgiveness. She didn't promise reconciliation. But she didn't close the door either. And for him, that fragile opening felt like hope. The divorce papers were still unsigned. The lawyer returned, sensing the tension had shifted. She looked at the documents, then at him. "We can finalize this today," she said calmly. He hesitated. Not because he wanted control, but because he wanted responsibility. "Let's pause," he said. "Not to trap you, but to do this right." She considered his words carefully. This wasn't a romantic moment. It was a practical one. They discussed boundaries, co-parenting, medical support, and respect. For the first time in a long while, they spoke like adults, not adversaries. She agreed to delay signing, not as a wife returning, but as a mother ensuring stability for her child. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. He went with her to her next doctor's appointment. He heard the heartbeat, the same heartbeat she once heard alone. That sound changed him. It wasn't abstract anymore. It was real. He began showing up, consistently. Not with grand gestures, but with presence. Calls. Appointments. Listening. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. She remained cautious, protecting herself and her unborn child. But she also allowed him to grow, to learn, to earn his place, not as a husband yet, but as a father. Their story didn't end with instant forgiveness or a perfect reunion. Life rarely works that way. But it also didn't end in bitterness. When the baby was born, he was there, holding his child with trembling hands, overwhelmed by a love he never expected. She watched him closely, still guarded, but hopeful. They chose a different path, one built on accountability, patience, and healing. Whether they would reunite as a couple remained uncertain. But they were united in purpose. Sometimes, love doesn't return the way we imagine. Sometimes it returns transformed, stronger, humbler, and wiser. And that day she came to finalize the divorce? It became the day he finally learned what he almost lost, and what he chose to fight for.